Hey there, this is the Resistor Vic podcast. I'm here to get folks thinking about politics as something that's really about regular people like you and me, and to realize that together we can make a difference. I'm Vic Myers. Welcome to the Resistance. So I'm going to jump right into it tonight because I want to give my guest as much time as possible to answer the questions I have for her and say whatever she wants to say. My guest tonight, Erin Petrey. Petrey,
like the day.
Thank you for joining me tonight. Tell us about Erin Petrey.
Yeah, listen, I'm going to try to give you the Cliff Notes version, right? So I am Erin Russell Petrey. I grew up on a farm, a 90-acre farm in Anderson County, Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. My dad was a small business owner in Lexington. My mom started out as an ER nurse and then went into pharmaceutical sales, one of the first women in the industry in the whole state of Kentucky. I got my undergrad in international affairs and anthropology. I ended up back at the University of Kentucky to do my master's in diplomacy. And then I graduated at the height of the recession. I served as the special assistant to the ambassador of Libya to the United States. After that, I established a career in building big things, everything from hospitals in the Middle East, exporting U.S. goods and services overseas, to large-scale manufacturing facilities, creating biomass in the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic of the U.S., creating jobs in dozens of states. I also built ports. And then I scaled companies that were on the cutting edge of technology, from electric vehicles to then data centers most recently. And then in November, I had a choice to make. I could sit around and post things to Instagram and get a big promotion at Amazon and get my 100K plus of stock options, or I could do something about this bullshit that's happening right now and the absolute dismantling of our democracy. And it's the easiest choice I've ever made. So I'm running for Congress to rebuild Kentucky, rebuild the Democratic Party, and reestablish the United States as what I thought it once was, which was a place that was a beacon for the entire world. And now it is a place that says, don't freaking come here.
Somebody turned off that light on the hill.
Yeah, they snuffed it right out.
While you were introducing yourself, I looked at my notes and remembered something very, very important that I did need to say before I introduced you. So we're recording this on Thursday night. It's going to air Monday morning, folks, which means that 24 hours after this airs, Election Day starts all across the country. So vote. Vote, vote, vote. In California, vote yes on Prop 50. In Colorado, vote yes on LL and MM. Those are two measures that would put a tiny little tax on wealthy people, but allow us to feed our kids in school. In Pennsylvania, vote to protect your Supreme Court, because when you protect your state Supreme Court, you're going to protect democracy. Everywhere, vote in every election, from school board to city council and everything else you can. Vote like our democracy depends on it, because it does.
Virginia is a big one, too. The gubernatorial race in Virginia is huge. You have a total nutter running on the GOP side saying that gay people should essentially be locked up. I mean, it's insane.
So you ready to get into the questions?
Yeah, if I can first.
Absolutely.
My email address is erin@erinpetrey.com. If there are issues that you want me to talk about and me to address, you send me an email. I also am on every single social media platform except for Lemonade. I want to hear from folks what they care about. And I talk to voters, but I also want to make this an open and honest dialogue. So Vic, let's go.
That's great. Before we do get to that, I forgot to put up your website. This is how it looks on your phone. The current website that's being updated. But I'm sure the address won't change, which if you're able to watch this and you're not just listening, the website is scrolling across the bottom with some other information. And if you're listening and not watching, it's Erin, ErinPetrey.com.
That's it.
And I'm sure that her new website's going to have a donate button right on the front somewhere. All right. So I'm going to ask you the questions. If you can if you can nail all of these questions, I will be very impressed. There's only 10 of them. And then at the end, I'm going to give you a chance to say whatever it is you want to say, to add. Did we miss something? Whatever you want to say at the end.
Great.
All right, Here we go. Question number 1. I don't know if it was somewhere on your website or when you first reached out to me. You called yourself a progressive.
Yes.
What does that mean to you? What progress should voters actually see by the end of your first term?
So, one of the things that was incredibly frustrating to me when hearing from the incumbent in this seat, who is Andy Barr, is that every time folks asked him, well, why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? He always came back with the refrain, well, I'm just a junior congressman. And I'm like, homie, you've been doing this for over a decade now. At what point do you no longer become a junior? And at what point do you actually become effective? I am the person in every single job I have ever had, from when I was a babysitter, when I was 12, to the last job I had at Amazon Web Services. I'm the person who people come to when there is a gnarly, rough issue and they're like, listen, we don't know how this needs to be solved, but we know you can do it. And for me, a progressive means a couple of things, right? Number one is emphasis on the word progress. We have to move things forward. To me, a progressive means that we have to have an actual evolution in the way that we're doing things. But progressive also means to me that we need to continue to put people first over special interests. And this current administration is one of these things where we have just been plagued with just continuing to expand the divide between the people who don't have as much and the people who have literally everything. It seems like this country is only controlled by about 8 billionaires, and the concept of the American dream is dead. Owning a home that is decent in a decent school district that has 2+ bedrooms, I mean, it costs you over, $3, $4, $500,000, right? And so for me, progressive means actual progress, not setting us back, changing things, not just restoring us to where we were, right? Of course, we need to reestablish the ability for women to choose, right? Roe versus Wade should be codified in law. But to get back to that point isn't progress for me. That is only trying to get us back to where we were. Progress means actually putting that into law and making sure that that cannot be repealed. Progress means creating programs for SNAP and WIC that come bundled. Not just that there are many different different programs where you're like, well, I got to do this for housing assistance. I got to do this for my food. I got to do this for my healthcare. It comes with things like additional education for upskilling. It comes with additional provisions for housing assistance. Because one of the things that we're really good at in this country is helping rich people get really rich and keeping poor people down and putting more and more people into poverty. And we're not good at creating that step in the middle, which used to be creating a middle class and actually letting people achieve the American dream. And so for me, progress means returning to what the American dream used to be. When people say, oh, well, I made minimum wage and I could buy a house. That's progress. And to me, also things like Medicare for all, things that they put together, put forward. Honestly, Nixon tried to do that. And then they tried to pass that in 2003. That's progress. I want real progress.
Okay. If I were scoring these, that would be a high score.
Thank you.
All right. When I did this video where I got the questions that I used to evaluate the four of you there in Kentucky, one of the things I mentioned was in Tommy Tuberville. That son of a gun is always in my head when I think about the quality of our politicians and our candidates, because this is a guy who can't tell you the three branches of government. So that's why some of these questions might be a little higher level than anything Tommy Tuberville or Jim Jordan or, God, Lauren Boebert could ever answer. Question number 2. Tell me something specific about what our Constitution says without telling me something that everybody knows.
So one thing that's really funny about the Constitution, and this is something very interesting that Trump, I don't know if he had good advisors doing this, but the Constitution does not actually dictate the number of Supreme Court justices on the Supreme Court. It only indicates that they have a lifetime appointment. One of the first things that I would do if elected to Congress would be to propose an amendment to the Constitution, which adds 2 members to the Supreme Court and then caps the number of justices to the Supreme Court and adds an actual term limit. I'm thinking 20 years because that would essentially be 2.5, assuming presidential administrations. And that's a funny thing because people think that, oh, well, we've only had this many, but really the Supreme Court started out with much fewer Supreme Court justices. At one point, there were 5, and then it changed, and then it changed. But that's actually not something that's in the Constitution. And that is what I would do. And that is
Nice.
something most people don't know.
All right. Question number 3. Have you heard of the Ending Hedge Fund Control of American Housing Act, and what's your view on the problem that bill was written to solve?
I have not heard of that particular legislation, but that certainly echoes something that I've talked about quite a bit. So, listen, I love the concept of Airbnb and Verbo, the fact that, people can have 2 houses, right? Like sometimes people have a lake house, right? And they want to be able to, be able to rent that out. And that helps people who are on vacation to, have a nice little experience. And it's also better for people with kids or dogs. The fact that we have so much private equity, hedge funds, and other types of businesses owning housing, just jacking up the prices in residential areas, especially residential areas that were lower income, maybe, or closer to like the airport, for example, but weren't necessarily as attractive. And it's essentially this new wave of gentrification, but it's not like by younger white people. It is by PE, by people who want to buy and then flip and then rent for a profit, whether it is long-term or short-term. I think that there absolutely should be quotas on whether it's hedge fund, VC, PE ownership of particular types of housing. And I also feel strongly that we should be moving to raise old government buildings or commercial real estate that is no longer being fully utilized and change that into affordable housing. We also need to change zoning requirements in order to move towards more affordable housing. But yes, long story short, I 100% agree that we need to put significant limits on private equity and hedge fund ability to own private real estate, especially residential real estate.
So the follow-up question is whether it's this kind of legislation or anything else, how can the people of Kentucky 6 be sure that when you say you're going to fight something for something, you're not just going to introduce a bill and then say, look, the bill I introduced?
So I'm going to invoke something that might be cringe to some folks, but it's actually very impactful here. So at Amazon, I don't know, y'all might know there are these tenets that people at Amazon are indoctrinated to figure out. But I will tell you, they're actually very good if you read them outside of a very corporate context. They're honestly the reason why Amazon has been as successful as they are. And they're the leadership principles. And one of them is think big. And every year you are encouraged to do something that's called write a think big doc or document, right? Which is if you could do anything at the company without any constraints, right? What would you do? And one of the things that I did is I wrote a think big document. And it was about creating this large scale e-waste collection project in all of the places where Amazon Web Services operated data centers. And, I sent it to my boss and she said, this is a great idea, but I think it doesn't have enough, buy-in necessarily from everyone else. Like you need to go talk to legal, you need to go talk to finance. So I can't necessarily put this up to the actual Think Big committee. And I said, okay, that's fair, because this is my first time actually doing it. But instead of just taking that as the end point, I continued to have conversations and push to conversations. And I said, we need to do a better job at Amazon of engaging with our communities and actually extending the aspects of sustainability that we're focused on, which are renewable energy, water, and circular economy, right? And I said, we're already doing things with energy and water, but we're not doing anything with circular economy, right? So recycling. And especially on the e-waste side, I said, we're not doing it. And we need to do that in communities and allow communities to use Amazon as a conduit for reducing the amount of e-waste that goes into their landfills. And so even though I was told that my idea was not going to get pushed forward, I said, fuck it. Pardon me. But I was like, fuck it. I'm going to make this happen anyways. And one of the last things I did before I left Amazon was create, kick off, and execute the pilot project of what I call Project Circle, which is the e-waste pilot program for in communities, which is the organization in Amazon Web Services. I did this because I knew that that was the right thing to do for people. I wasn't getting extra leadership buy-in, and I also knew I was quitting. So I could have potentially gotten promoted, but I knew I was quitting. And even though I knew I was quitting, I decided to do the right thing for people and create a pilot program and create the actual playbook for Amazon to take that program and replicate it in every single place that Amazon has data centers, to actually give back more to their communities without any reason for me actually committing to myself. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And I'm also the person who, every single job I've ever freaking had, I'm the person, like I said in the beginning of this episode, give me a problem and I am going to run it to ground.
All righty then. Let's get into a little bit of policy wonkish stuff.
All right.
What is the Sherman Antitrust Act, and what, if anything, do you think Congress should do about it today?
Well, I mean, first off, I'm absolutely shocked that monopolies have not been, like we hear a lot about antitrust being brought to the fore about, like, gosh, what was one of the most recent ones? It was over, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose it. It was over telecom. It was a telecom issue. But essentially, it promotes competition, right? This was something that was preventing all of those like big scale. These were like your like oil barons and all of those folks who were trying to, create all of these monopolies and trying to control markets, right? That's really what the Sherman Antitrust Act was, right? And so, named after the senator. But, today I'm actually shocked that we are not seeing antitrust being. This goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that this country seems to be owned by 8 different billionaires. And the fact that Meta, for example, listen, I use Instagram, I use Facebook, I use WhatsApp, but the fact that all of the communication in this country is essentially funneled through a handful of folks, I don't know how we haven't broken that up yet. I don't know how. I also think that let me pull something else for you. I think that the Antitrust Act needs to be reimagined. Because now what we have is we have people like Elon Musk owning X, owning Tesla, owning, SpaceX, owning the Boring Company, right? These become giant conglomerates that, if you look at them separately, right, they might seem benign. You're like, none of these are actually working together. But they all roll up to the same person. And I think that what we need in this country right now is a reimagining of what antitrust means. It's not necessarily that, Standard Oil buys somebody else, right? Or that, Facebook buys Instagram, right? We need to look at this in a different way, and we need to go up to the very top. We are in a situation that Russia was in back in the 90s, which is this oligarchical sort of control over all of the means of production. You've got an oil baron who also owns the telecom company. You've got this guy who also owns this, right? And so I think that the way that we need to reimagine the way that we look at antitrust isn't just by industry, but it's also by who are the major shareholders.
Nice. Well, Ms. Petrey, you are definitely no Tommy Tuberville.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Now, let's get a little closer to home, if you will.
Let's do it.
So, because so far a lot of these questions have been about the bigger, broader things. But you're not running for my district. You're running for Kentucky 6, which Lexington is the center of it, right?
Yes.
And the biggest city?
Lexington.
Okay.
And that's where I'm sitting right now.
How can Kentucky families that represent generations of coal miners find prosperity again?
One thing, there's no coal in my district.
No?
Nope. Now, the
my
furthest
ignorance,
east,
I'm like, Kentucky, coal, there must be coal everywhere.
No, but I love this question. And so as someone who has worked in environmental sciences and renewable energy and sustainability for well over a decade, and someone who's been very deeply steeped in conservation and naturalism since I was a small child. This hits very closely to home. Now, there is no coal in my district, but the easternmost county in my district is Powell County, Stanton, Clay City. And there are folks there who say that they used to be coal miners, right? But the reality is that coal supports less than 10,000 jobs in the state of Kentucky today. In the past 10 years, coal has dropped from 95% of our grid to 68% of our grid mix, right? But the challenge is, I remember as a kid, there were commercials, there were billboards, there were radio ads that all said, coal keeps the lights on. And that was true at one point. And for 68% of the grid, that is still true. But that's continuing to drop. And the thing is that folks don't realize is that the coal companies are the ones that are finding it less and less profitable. The administration is doing nothing to help coal miners get their black lung settlements. They were just at the Department of Labor protesting about this. Listen, the Department of Labor won't even uphold requirements for them to put netting and tenting in mines to prevent inhalation of dust that causes black lung. There was a study that was put out about a month ago that showed Kentucky was at the very bottom of health and climate outcomes due to our grid mix. And a lot of that is because of coal. And I actually got called out by a Democratic politician here in Kentucky for saying that I was anti-coal at a meeting. I'm not anti-coal. Coal's doing a good job of putting itself out of business, and coal created this state, but that doesn't mean it has to keep the lights on forever. But what our legislature here in Kentucky has not done a good job of is creating incentives for other types of energy to come in and fill that gap. Natural gas is a big part of that gap today, and it is going to be an important part of that gap for a long time. But we can also start to create more and more things that allow us to have more affordable energy, more sustainable energy. And when I say sustainable, I don't just mean environmentally friendly. I mean sustainability is something that actually requires or gives us energy that allows us to rely on it over and over again, less intermittency. So that's things like solar and wind and geothermal and nuclear, and we need permitting reform. But beyond that, we also need good incentives, both on a state level as well as a national level for solar, for wind, and we need significant permitting reform and also transmission and distribution reform and augmentation of the actual infrastructure for distribution and transmission of power lines for us to not only keep up with increasing energy demands, but also for us to continue to transition out of the fossil fuel industry.
So I made the assumption that coal was in your district, but I also learned while getting ready, it surprised me because my community, the community that I live in, was founded on coal and cattle. Coal is long, long gone in this community, even though we got a mine up
Colorado,
there by
right?
the Chinese. Yeah. And cattle is scarce. So do you have cattle in your district? Because I was surprised to find that Kentucky is one of the top cattle producing states in the eastern part of the country.
Yeah, so we do have some cattle, right? Cattle is mostly in other counties. So Madison County is really the main county. So Richmond on the other side of Lexington is the one with the most cattle. Obviously, horses are kind of the things that we're known for, but my district has a lot of soy as well as a lot of corn. So when it comes to actual agriculture, it's mostly crop based. And so we were a big tobacco state, and a lot of that has kind of moved more towards like those corn and soybeans, lesser so things like barley. But Madison County is going to be the biggest cattle producing county in my district.
Do you think the soy farmers in your district are going to stick with dipstick? Well,
considering their main market is China and they sold nothing to China this year, probably not. I mean, listen, I don't know, and I'm gonna say something like very, very straightforwardly right now, and that is, this is a message to everyone who's ever voted for Trump. And this is also a message for all of those folks who don't understand why people voted for Trump. I understand that you wanted a different outcome, but the outcome that we have is not what you imagined. And none of us should be in a position to make other people feel bad for that. Because telling people that they have a moral shortcoming, they fucked up, nobody likes that, right? Nobody wants to be told that they were wrong and haha, you're screwed, right? Especially when that impacts your pocketbook or your ability to feed your family or pay your mortgage or pay your health insurance bill. I think the truth is that there is room under the tent for all of us. And all I care about today is moving forward and creating a world and a country that I used to be proud of. I want to create a future that is truly what America's about, not this bullshit that MAGA is touting, because clearly it is leaving everyone behind.
My next question. What is the solution for our crumbling healthcare system?
Oh, gosh. Well, I do have very specific thoughts on this, but I'm going to lead with, I have Crohn's disease, okay? I have, an invisible disability. No one would have known. I almost died from it a few years ago, unless you scroll all the way back in my socials or ask me about it. I get an infusion every 2 months. I worry every day that something could happen to me, that I'm going to be back in the hospital. But I will tell you, when I was in the hospital on my deathbed, I was still working. I was still working on my laptop. I actually got, during my performance review, I had a guy on our executive team tell me, Erin, I've been the CEO of multiple companies and no one has ever joined a Zoom from a hospital bed. You're the first on that. But when it comes to actually solving our crumbling healthcare system, I mean, the number one thing is that we have to do is, you talked about antitrust before. That's where we have to hit it. I'm sorry, but we have to crumble these health insurance companies. It's gotten to the point similar to banks in 2008, right? It's that whole concept of too big to fail. We're looking at health insurance companies like they're too big to fail, and they keep saying, well, costs are going up and up and up and up. And I was like, well, it seems like CEO salaries and CEO bonuses are also going up and up and up and up. Where doctor pay and nurses pay is not going up and up. But administrators and executives of hospital systems pay is going up and up and up. So there's a clear gap here, right? So I would absolutely propose something like a Medicare for all, where, and I literally tweeted about this like earlier today, where it says that at the very minimum, we need to have primary care, preventative screenings, key generic drugs that are life-saving and requirement for maintenance, things like insulin, hypertension drugs, cardiac drugs, whatever it may be. Those things should be free. Trump came out and said, oh, we're going to make all these things free. We're going to make healthcare costs free. And then what did he do? Created
Nothing.
Trump RX. And I was like, wow, you just created another business to put money in your pocket. That was what your solution was?
Next question. We've got 4 questions to get through.
Great. Let's keep going.
What should the federal minimum wage be, and should it automatically rise with inflation?
So it's actually very funny. So my mother is a 3-time Trump voter, right? And she is now one of the most outspoken critics against him. She has a notes app on her phone from the bottom of the basement to the top of the roof. The first one being that she was like, why did he pardon everyone at January 6th? But she said to me today, she said, Erin, I watched your video about the minimum wage, and that was very good. It was very informative. She's like, is all that true? And I was like, yeah. And I said, listen, the minimum wage has not been changed since 2009. It's what, $7.25 an hour? Adjusted for inflation, that's $10.95 an hour. So already, if you're making $7.25 an hour, which the minimum wage, state minimum wage, is still the federal minimum wage in 13 states, including right here in Kentucky. 14,000 people are still on the minimum wage here in Kentucky, which is 14,000 too many. And I said,
which puts a full-time worker well below the poverty level.
Yeah, it's $15,000 a year, right? And I said that would put you at around $200 a week, right? And I said that's $200 a week to pay for rent, gas, insurance, groceries, and God forbid you need a new shirt, or maybe you're like, gosh, I would really just love a latte today. God forbid. but it's the avocado toast that's getting us, obviously. And, I did a lot of the math. And for someone to have a living wage here in Fayette County, Kentucky, of course, it's going to be different across the board. And you would need to make it, different. And I honestly think that we should not have a federal minimum wage. If people want to talk about states' rights, right, we need freaking minimum wages that are applicable to places and what their standard of living is what their cost of living is. I'm sorry,
so
because
do you mean we shouldn't have a federal minimum wage, or we shouldn't have a single wage that applies to all?
It's the latter.
Okay.
I mean, I think, but also, I'll be honest with you, like a federal minimum wage, like what's the purpose? Like the purpose of a federal minimum wage is you can't go below this, guys. That's way too little. But it hasn't been changed since 2009, and inflation has gone up how much since 2009? So, I mean,
Exactly.
listen, we can have a federal minimum wage and maybe it's $18 an hour, right? And maybe it's stepped up or whatever it is, right? We can have a federal minimum wage, but it absolutely needs to be more than $7.25 an hour because it should never be over 10 years between increasing that, right? So if you want to have a federal minimum wage, what you have to do is it needs to be at the very least in line with the census, right? So you know exactly what people are making, you know what the population density is of different areas, and you can then indicate what the federal minimum wage needs to be at the very minimum, right? To avoid people from going under the poverty line. Because the thing is that if you reduce the number of people who are below the poverty line, that also reduces your dependence on programs like SNAP and Medicaid and WIC and, all of these other programs that help folks who are below the poverty line. Because I know people who are civil servants in Powell County or in Bourbon County here who are working full time and are still below the poverty line. Like, why? Like, you are working for the government in your municipality, but you are below the poverty line and you still need to be on SNAP? How is that possible? And they're saying, oh, well, you need to work. And it's like, well, I do work a full-time job. I work a full-time job at the water treatment plant in Bourbon County, but I still can't buy groceries. What is wrong with that equation? We are
Way too
putting our
much.
money in the wrong places, right? And so I do absolutely believe in the minimum wage. And I do know a fact that, listen, small businesses are always saying, well, we're gonna bear the brunt of it. And that's why we need programs like Medicare for All. Because then they wouldn't have to deal with the ACA kind of provisions that says, well, you need to spend all this money on healthcare for your employees. Okay, well, we're going to take care of that for you. But the other thing is too, is we can do it on a step level, and all of that money that goes towards your employees is going to get infused back in the economy. And it's a rising tide lifts all ships situation.
Great. My next question now. Either you're much better preserved than I am, or I'm much older than you are. And I feel a certain amount of guilt for my generation in terms of what we're leaving young people today. So this next question is, a lot of young people don't trust the system or the Democratic Party. Many have drifted toward Trump or tuned out entirely. What should young people believe in you? Believe in this party, and who do you see yourself supporting to lead Democrats in the House?
Sure. So there were a lot of questions embedded in that, right?
That was a big one.
That was an and, right? That was a very
So feel free
compound
to
question.
say, what was that other part? I won't hold it against you.
I'm going to answer the number one question, which is why should young people even talk to me, believe in me, listen to me? I talk to a lot of young folks. And I'm 38 years old. I just turned 38 2 weeks ago. I am a full-on millennial. I graduated grad school at the height of the recession. My whole life has been in unprecedented times. And my God, I just want a precedented year. But that keeps us on our toes, right? But I was talking to, young
You're
person.
not old enough to remember when we had normal politics.
I was someone who was very, very engaged in the 90s. So.
Well, I didn't mean that as an
90s.
insult. I've been thinking about that a lot today. The younger generations don't know what normal political discourse in a functional government is.
I tell folks, I say, y'all, I miss it when politics was boring, when we could actually talk about policies. And we weren't just like, but this guy is a total nut job. But I talked to Lily. So Lily is someone who's become a friend of mine from Powell County. Lily, I'm sorry if you're listening to this. I'm going to embarrass you. They were telling me today, they said, listen, all young people want to know is exactly what you think. And they want you to be blunt with them. They want you to be brutally honest with them. Don't tell me what you hope to accomplish. Tell us what you think you can actually accomplish. And I'm going to tell you, and people can say, oh, we don't need more people from the private sector in politics. And I'm like, actually, you do. You need more people from the private sector who have actually succeeded. Because Donald Trump, I'm sorry, but Donald Trump is not a real businessman. Donald Trump is a fucking idiot. Come on, all the bankruptcies, all he's done is been able to seize the means of production, AKA real estate right now. So he just has assets out the ass, right? And that is what he has. And so in business, right, in the private sector, what I always had to do was come to people with, listen, this is what I plan to do. This is how much money I need. And this is when I plan to get it done. And if I had delays on schedule, if I had overruns on budget, if I had issues with the quality of my work or what I was able to deliver, that was a real problem. And that would always count against me. I would get fired, if I didn't deliver. And that's the kind of things that we need people in Congress to do. And that's the other thing that I think that also differentiates me from everyone else in the field here in the Kentucky Six is that every single job I've ever had, A, I've earned it on my own. Number two, I would have gotten fired if I didn't deliver all the time. And number three, I've actually succeeded in Washington. And going back to what you were saying now, is that young people feel disenchanted and disenfranchised because all they've heard is talking points and purity tests. And they just want people to get shit done. And I am someone who gets shit done, and I've always done that. And that's exactly what I plan to do in Congress. And then what was the last question that you asked? Because I can't remember now.
Who do you see yourself supporting to lead Democrats in the House?
So it was funny. Axios reached out and asked me, would you support Hakeem Jeffries to be Speaker of the House? And I said, listen, if a vote were called today, I would give him the benefit of the doubt to prove himself. To prove himself. I understand things could feel different if you're in the minority, right? But sometimes true power changes people and it makes people feel invigorated and empowered. He has come to power at one of the roughest, most divided times ever. But I've also been incredibly disappointed with the way that he has, pushed things, because he really hasn't. If I were to be elected in the primary and then in the general in November 2026, and things were called for a vote for the Speaker of the House in January of 2027, I couldn't tell you that I would vote for Hakeem Jeffries. There is a lot of time between now and then. And I'm hoping that someone we may have maybe been underestimating or eyes haven't been on are going to come to the fore. Who that person is, I don't know. Because I'm going to be totally honest with you, Vic. I am not a big political wonk. I don't look through every other House reps record and I'm like, ooh, what are you doing? What are you doing? I like to focus on the people where I am and the issues that I care about. And I know the people where I live care about. And I think that the leader, though, that we need has not emerged yet.
I've got two more questions. And
great, let's do it.
There's no way I'm getting this edited down to 20 minutes. I know that already.
Oh, no, never. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm going to take it back to Kentucky again. And
Great,
to
love
young
it.
people. If I were a young parent in Kentucky, would your work in Congress make it easier for my kids to afford college or job training after high school?
Oh, that's such a good question. So I've done a lot of hiring in my career. everything from administrative assistants to executives. And one of the things that frustrated me the most was when I was hiring for things like executive assistants or administrative assistants. And the executives who I was hiring for would say, well, I need them to at least have a bachelor's degree. And I said, why? And they said, well, because they should. And really, that was just an ego thing. They were like, oh, well, I want someone as intellectual as me. And I was like, well, you need somebody to like manage your calendar and do your expense reports. Why do you need them to have gone in debt, $120,000? Like, why do you need that? Like, even if they have a psychology BA, like, is that okay? They're like, yeah, it's fine. And I'm like, so why? When I was growing up, we were told, go to school, get good grades, go to college, get a degree. You're going to get a great job. I graduated at the height of the recession. I had to move to Korea and get paid $24,000 a year as an English teacher. And I had a master's degree. Okay. So for me, I think that what we need to do is we need to reimagine how we look at education. More than anything, we need to make sure that kids can read, that kids can know basic math and science. But we also need to pass laws. And I hate over legislating anything, but sometimes that's what you need to do. Number one, I think that we absolutely need to pass laws that many other states have that require salaries to be posted with jobs. I'm sorry, but if you are hiring for a job, it should be very clear what the salary should be. And there should be salary transparency. And that is one thing that's going to make it easier for your kid to get a job that's actually going to pay them. We also need to put more investment into things like community and vocational schools, but not just community and vocational schools, because we love to talk about that, right? But it's all about developing a pipeline. So one of the things that I talk about as part of my platform is bringing in investments. Well, first off, we need to help solve the energy issue, which will also help us bring in investments. But when we bring in these investments from companies, we also need companies, we need to do a better job at negotiating good deals for our people. And usually it's like, oh, well, you have to create so many jobs and you have to invest in a library. No. What they need to also do is invest in basic and vital infrastructure, whether it be power generation or upskilling and reskilling facilities at things like community and technical colleges. If we are building large-scale battery facilities, right? We don't want a bunch of people just moving here from, like, let's say North Carolina, which did a great job with imbuing their public education system with STEM education. We need to make sure that we give a level playing field. And so saying, listen, we want to invite you to build this, innovative manufacturing facility here in Kentucky. But as you build that, which is going to take quite a few years, we need you to start investing now in a program that helps to upskill our folks to then create a steady supply of workers for your facility. The other thing is that I think that we need to invest more in programs like Teach for America, Peace Corps, and there's also ones that are focused on healthcare, right? But we need to put more attention to them, especially for nurses and especially primary care and general care physicians, for saying, hey, we want you to go to rural Kentucky for 4 years, and we are going to pay for your college, right? If you do 4 years in this rural area, right? People bitch about H-1B visas, but the main reason H-1B visas are so necessary, especially for our healthcare system, and the reason why you find the random Indian doctor in like Northwestern West Virginia is because they don't have anyone who wants to go there and actually be a primary care physician. But there's so much need for people to be physical therapists, to be primary care physicians, ER techs, phlebotomists, nurses, even technicians, on plumbers, carpenters, you name it, auto manufacturing jobs. There's so much that can be done.
Okay. I've got one question left. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a softball. It's kind of embarrassing.
Cool.
Given the other questions, this one's kind of a softball, I think. Will you accept PAC money?
PAC money?
Yeah.
So here's the funny thing about PACs, right? So PACs have been around since actually like the 1920s, the early 1900s, right? So it's actually been around for a long time. And I will say not all PACs are created equal. I believe very strongly in campaign finance reform. And the reason why I'm kind of backtracking into this question is because I'm laying out the kind of electoral landscape that I think is necessary. We need to have shorter election cycles. Do you know how much we could all be doing for people in the interim? So I believe very strongly in reducing election cycles. I also believe capping election spending. And you can talk about term limits all you want, but I don't really think that we've come to a good science on term limits. But you can significantly reduce incumbency rates if you shorten election cycles, right? Term limits is something that, again, like people say it's 3 years or 6 years for the House. Like I don't know. I need to read more on it. Like in theory, I'm cool with it, but I don't know the correct answer.
I believe that we, the people, are the term limits.
Right now, we are not.
We're not, but we can be. It's within our power. If only we would grasp it and use it, we could be the term limits.
Yeah, we could be, but I'm going to tell you right now, like currently, like no one can go up against Mitch McConnell. They've tried. $100 million couldn't go against Mitch McConnell. 20 points lost, right? So I think we can be, but again, it goes towards, again, the election cycle and it goes towards campaign finance. So there's a lot there, right? But there are PACs out there that are for, like Planned Parenthood has a PAC, right? Planned Parenthood promotes candidates that are pro-choice and pro-women's health care. And then there's APAC. So not all PACs are created equal. With the cards I've been dealt in this current cycle, I would accept money from PACs that make sense and are aligned with my values, because if I don't, I'm screwing myself. And I'm also, frankly, screwing the voters who believe in me. I have a set of cards that I have been dealt. And you go with the cards you've been dealt, and once you get into power, then you can change it. Then we need to overturn Citizens United. Then we need to do things. But I am very careful about what I do. And I will also tell you the other thing, if Amazon came and were like, here's 10K today, I'd be like, cool, thank you. This is going to help me pay my staffer. But that doesn't mean that they own me. And that doesn't, because remember, PAC money is only good. Like PACs are only impactful once you need to go back to the well.
Okay. Now, so you're the one who said APAC, so I have to ask you where you're at.
No, I've already been very public. I would never.
Good.
I've answered this online. I've also done a video on this. I would never, ever. Listen, I equate APAC money to foreign meddling in elections. So.
Well, that is all 10 questions. And I don't know why I thought I could get through 10 questions in a shorter amount of time.
In 20 minutes? Oh my God, you're talking to me. You don't know me. You didn't know me before this, Nick. I have a lot of thoughts.
I can now say that at least one of the Kentucky 6 Democratic candidates for this seat is not an empty suit, in my view. Of course, I'm not one of your voters. Hopefully your voters will see this and be able to judge that for themselves. So I told you I would, where'd it go? My note. All right. Before I give you the opportunity to say whatever you want and anything that we didn't cover, the point of me asking the questions that I asked was, and I'm saying this as much for my listeners as anybody else, is because part of what happens in our political discourse these days is we have politicians who never give us anything that we can hold them accountable for. And I think that's part of the problem. So that was where these questions were coming from. It was kind of the heart of the questions, was to say, now, if Erin Petrey wins this primary and goes on to represent Kentucky 6, which used to be a solid Democratic district, am I wrong?
No, it did. So actually in graduate school, I interned for Ben Chandler, the last Democrat who was in this seat for 10 months when I was in graduate school.
Well, now if you are the eventual Congresswoman from Kentucky 6, we have 10 questions that people could say, but you said this. And that's what I was getting at when I was saying that voters need more. So anyway, having said all that, you have the floor. What did we not cover? What is the last thing? Well, wait, before we go there, one more time, her website, folks, Erin Petrey, ErinPetrey.com is where you can go to sign up to help her, to phone bank, eventually door knock, text. It's also where you can go to donate to her campaign.
Cash money, please. If every single one of your followers gave me $1, I would not have to accept PAC money.
There you go. And that's another thing that I talk about in some of my videos, because we have an outstanding candidate for U.S. Senate here running against John Hickenlooper, who's 73 years old, people. She is a great progressive candidate, but she's just one of 10 examples I can think of off the top of my head, people who would make good representatives in our government, but they're not getting the support from all of the people online saying that we need exactly this kind of person. It's like, I want someone who does this, believes this, and promises that. And you get somebody who says, I believe in this, and I'm promising that, and I'm going to do this, all the things that we want, and then we don't send them $5 when we have it. So anyway, I got off on my tangent. Probably going to have to edit that out too.
You're fine.
Yeah, but we're at an hour 20 now. I've got to edit something. And people came to hear you, not me. So.
Sure.
The floor is yours.
Vic, so the one thing, Vic, first off, thank you so much for having me. And thanks for sticking with me through this. One of the things that I do find consistently that folks don't ask congressional candidates about is how they would handle constituent services. And as a member of the House of Representatives, the number one duty that you have is, yes, of course, to represent your constituency in Congress, but it's also to serve your constituents. Constituent services is such a vital part of the role of a House member. And one of the things that I've always prided myself on my entire career is responsiveness. I always answer everyone. Even if I can't get done what you need me to get done, I will tell you that. And I will tell you why. And I will potentially even give you ways to get that done. And so the one thing that I will absolutely say is that I am fully committed to operating a very strong, an incredibly robust, and incredibly effective constituent services arm of my office. And if the state of Kentucky, the Commonwealth of Kentucky, decides to choose me as their representative, as their fighter of choice in this race against MAGA to flip the 6th district, I promise you, I will not only be your best fighter in Washington, but also here in Central Kentucky, and make sure that you get everything that you deserve as a citizen of the United States, because that is something that we have lost. The actual accountability and the actual person who is going to show up in your community and answer the phone and answer your emails. And I want to be that for you, Kentucky. So if you resonate with this, send me $1, send me $5. Heck, the max is $3,500 if you're feeling generous. But I really do want to be your fighter. And I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing this for you. I really, truly am. And I hope that you trust me on that. And I welcome you to hold me accountable to that.
Excellent. Have you read Tip O'Neill's book, All Politics is Local? I asked every one of my candidate guests this, and so far everybody said no. There's a story, what I think is the main point of his book. You know who Tip O'Neill was?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Okay. For those who don't, he was a very powerful Speaker of the House during the Reagan administration. He was in Congress a really long time. Anyway, back when politics was boring. He wrote a book. He was from Illinois, Chicago, I believe. Mm-hmm. And in this book, he's telling about his very last campaign. And it's election night. He's won, of course, and they're at the thing celebrating his victory, and he's talking at the punch bowl with one of his favorite and longest supporters, a gal who's been with him from the beginning working on his campaigns. And he asked her jokingly, he said, "Did you vote for me?" And she looked at him very seriously and said, "No, I didn't." And he says, "Really?" And I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, but he asked her why. And she said, "Because you never asked me to." So
this is a great thing.
My helpful hint for your generation of candidates that I've been interviewing: never, ever leave an opportunity to say, "Will you vote for me?"
Vic, I will tell you one thing that my mother taught me early on when I was interviewing for jobs. Every time I went into a job interview, she said, "Erin, make sure you ask for the job." And every time I called her after a job interview, she said, "Did you ask for the job?" So what I'm doing now is I'm asking for you, 6th District of Kentucky, to vote for me on May 19th, 2026 in the primaries. And I'm asking for you, whoever might still be with us listening, to please go to my page, erinpetrey.com. Give me $1, give me $5, 10, 25, however much you can. Because I want to try to support more voices like me, people who want to get shit done.
And I think that's a great way to end it. There you have it, folks. The point of this interview with Erin Petrey from Kentucky's 6th District. She's one of 4 Democrats running. The point of this interview, this episode, was to find out whether or not Erin Petrey is an empty suit. And I think she's done a pretty good job of answering that. And I think, at least from my point of view, the answer is unequivocally no. So if you've listened through all of this, I'm grateful, and thank you for making me a part of your day. Good day. Well, folks, looks like we're back at the barn and it's time to call it a day. I sure do appreciate you spending your time with me. If you want to help keep this podcast going by supporting me, you can get a paid subscription on Substack, where I'm Resistor Vic. Or if you're the type that'd rather go to PayPal, I'm also resistorvic@gmail.com. Thanks again.